After my grandmother died, we found an old letter that mentioned the illegal sale of the family heritage. This letter caused a conflict between me and my siblings. When Grandma Ruth died, it was the kind of funeral where people pretended to cry and whispered too loud about the will. I stood there in my black suit, thrift store, slightly too tight in the shoulders, watching my siblings sip bitter church coffee like it was poison they had to finish to earn their inheritance. We hadn't been a close family in years. Not since Dad died. Not since we scattered like spilled marbles across the country. She left the house to all of us, me, Lydia, Caleb, and June. That was what the lawyer said, folding his hands like he just resolved world peace. For ways, clean and simple. No arguments, right? Wrong. We found the letter a week later, folded between pages of her old Bible, the one she kept locked in the cedar chest at the foot of her bed. It wasn't dated, but the paper was yellowing and smelled like tobacco. Ruth smoked until the day her lungs quit on her. Lydia found it first. "Guys, you need to see this." She said it like she'd found a body. I leaned over the kitchen table, Caleb beside me, June on her phone like always. Lydia unfolded the paper like it was a relic, her hands trembling in that overly theatrical way she had. It was Ruth's handwriting. No question. If something happens to me before I can fix this, I need you to know the truth. The house on Miller Street was sold under the table in 1987. Your Uncle Mark forged the deed and pocketed the money. I kept it quiet to protect the family, but I never forgave him. I never will. That land was supposed to be yours. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Caleb muttered, "Well, shit." That letter cracked us wide open. June thought it was fake. Caleb thought it didn't matter. Lydia wanted blood. And me? I wasn't sure what I wanted. Just that I couldn't let it go. Not when everything I believed about Grandma Ruth, the woman who raised us after Mom split, was suddenly riddled with holes. "Uncle Mark's still alive," I said, my voice flat. "We can ask him." "Ask him what?" June said, flicking her phone off. "If he screwed the family 30 years ago, he'll deny it. Or lie. Or both." She wanted us to know. Lydia snapped. "That means something." I watched them bicker like we were kids again, fighting over the last cookie in the jar, and I felt this slow, sour boil in my stomach. It wasn't just about property. It was about trust, about roots, about the things that are supposed to be ours. The past had teeth, and it had just taken a bite. That night, I lay awake in Ruth's bed, surrounded by the ghosts of old perfume and cracked wallpaper. I kept seeing her handwriting, that shaky but deliberate scrawl. I never forgave him. Neither would I. Not yet. The next morning, Lydia was already up and pacing the porch, smoking one of her emergency cigarettes. She only smoked when she was stressed. Judging by the ashtray full of butts, she was spiraling. "You really think we should talk to him?" she asked, not looking at me. Her eyes were on the empty road, like Uncle Mark might appear at the end of it with a shovel and a guilty conscience. "I think we don't have a choice." She handed me the letter, now folded into a rough square and stained at the corner with coffee. I slid it into my jacket pocket like it was evidence in a murder trial. "Caleb's already calling it a hoax," she said. "He said Grandma was probably senile, that maybe she imagined the whole thing." I snorted. She remembered every birthday and every mistake I ever made. That woman could recite phone numbers from 1965 like she'd written them in blood. Don't give me that senile crap. She didn't argue. Later, the four of us sat in the living room like some half-assed tribunal. June sprawled on the couch, scrolling through Zillow listings on her phone, already counting her share of the house, probably. Caleb stood near the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. He'd always been the tough one, the athlete, the favorite, though none of us would say it out loud. "So," I said, "we need to talk to Uncle Mark." Caleb shrugged. "He lives out in Ridgeville. I haven't seen him in years." "You mean since he skipped Grandma's 70th birthday?" Lydia asked. "Exactly." June sighed. "Can we not stir up ancient family drama over some dusty letter written by a woman who's no longer here to explain it?" Lydia snapped. "She's the one who wanted us to know." "Or she wanted you to know?" June shot back. "You found it. That's when I knew. We weren't just dealing with a lie. We were dealing with different versions of truth." Lydia wanted justice. June wanted closure. Caleb wanted peace. And me? I wanted the damn facts. "Look," I said, trying to pull us back. Whatever happened, this is part of our story, and we owe it to her and ourselves to figure out. They didn't agree. Not out loud. But 2 days later, we piled into Caleb's pickup truck like it was 1998 again and headed for Ridgeville. The road wound through old farmland and sagging barns, the kind of landscape that doesn't forgive or forget. Lydia played with the radio the whole ride. June pretended to nap. Caleb drove like he was heading into battle. When we pulled into Mark's driveway, it was clear he wasn't doing so bad. Two-story colonial. Fresh paint. A red Ford parked out front. Nothing screamed guilty, but nothing screamed innocent either. Play it cool, I said. Define cool, Lydia muttered. I knocked on the door. Mark answered faster than I expected. Thinner than I remembered. Grayer, but the same cold eyes. Well, he said, looking at all of us like we were census takers or a plague. If it isn't Ruth's little parade. We found a letter, I said, skipping pleasantries. He blinked. What kind of letter? You know what kind. He hesitated, then stepped aside. You'd better come in. And just like that, the past opened its door. The inside of Uncle Mark's house smelled like lemon polish and meatloaf. It looked clean, too clean, like a place kept presentable for guests that never came. Old family pictures lined the hallway, but none of them included us. Not a single one. Sit wherever, he muttered, heading to the kitchen. Lydia leaned in and whispered, I don't like this. I didn't either, but we were already too deep. Mark came back with a tray of iced tea. Lydia declined. June took a glass but didn't drink. Caleb guzzled half as like it was a dare. I pulled out the letter and placed it on the table between us like a loaded gun. Mark stared at it, not touching it. That's Ruth's handwriting. You didn't even read it yet, Lydia snapped. He looked at her like she was a fly buzzing too close. I don't need to. I've seen enough of her lists and notes and guilt trips over the years. She had a flair for dramatics. She says you forged a deed, I said evenly. Sold a house on Miller Street in 1987 and kept the money. He smiled just barely. She really never let that go, huh? My jaw clenched. So it's true. Mark leaned back in his chair. It was complicated. Your grandfather, God rest him, had debts. Medical bills, bank loans. That house was the only thing not already mortgaged to hell. I did what had to be done. You stole it, Lydia hissed. I saved what was left, he snapped back. You think Ruth would have kept the house if she'd known the IRS was coming for it? We'd have lost everything. I made a deal. Quietly. It kept the wolves at bay. You didn't tell her, I said. You let her think she still owned it. He looked away. She was grieving. Your mother had just left. Your father was drinking himself into an early grave. She didn't need another burden. So you took it upon yourself to lie? Caleb said. For decades. Mark stood up. I did what I had to. I'm not proud of it. But I'm not sorry either. The silence that followed was heavy. Unspoken. And then June, of all people, broke it. Okay, she said, brushing invisible lint from her jeans. So it's true. That's it, right? The house is gone. He admits it. Nothing to fight over. Lydia stared at her like she'd just betrayed us all. That house was supposed to be part of our inheritance. And now it's not. June replied coolly. Move on. I stood, unable to stay still. That house was where Mom was born. Where Dad proposed. Where Ruth raised us after the whole world fell apart. You think it's just about the money. Mark sighed. You want justice? Sue me. But there's nothing left to take. I want the truth, I said. He looked at me then, and for a moment, I thought I saw something raw behind a mask. Regret? Maybe. Or maybe just fatigue. The truth is, he said, families eat each other alive for less than this. Be careful how deep you dig. We left without saying goodbye. Outside, Lydia stormed toward the truck. He's hiding more. I know it. Caleb climbed behind the wheel, silent. June lit a cigarette, her first in years, and stared into the distance like she wished she'd never come. Me? I looked at the house one last time. Something wasn't sitting right. That letter wasn't a confession. It was a warning. Back at Grandma Ruth's house, the air felt heavier, like her ghost was watching us from every dusty corner. None of us spoke much on the drive back. Caleb blasted classic rock the whole way like the right chord progression might drown out the sound of betrayal. Lydia didn't even go inside when we got home, just paced circles in the yard like a wolf sniffing for blood. I found myself back in the bedroom, the Bible still open on the nightstand like we left it. I flipped through the pages again, half hoping for another letter, a postscript, a second shoe waiting to drop. Instead, I found an old photo tucked between psalms. It was us, all four kids, me, Caleb, Lydia, and June, lined up in front of the Miller Street house. I was maybe 6. Lydia had a popsicle dripping down her hand. Dad stood behind us with that dumb camcorder he used to bring everywhere. Ruth sat in a rocking chair, barefoot, waving like a queen on her porch throne. On the back, in blue ink, she'd written, "What they don't know can still hurt them." I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. "What is it?" June asked from the doorway, her voice thin. I handed her the photo. Her lips moved as she read the words, and for a second, something flickered behind her eyes. Not fear, not anger, recognition. "You knew," I said. Her face hardened. I had suspicions. Jesus, June. I thought she was just exaggerating. She told me once, late at night after her second glass of wine, that Mark had sold something he had no right to. I didn't press. It was Ruth. Half her stories were half-truths. Lydia chose that moment to come in, her eyes wild. "I want to talk to the county clerk's office. If he forged a deed, there should be a record. Something." Caleb leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. It was 1987. You think they're just going to hand over documents like it's the damn public library? "She hid that letter for a reason," I said. "She didn't want us to find it until she was dead." "Maybe because she knew it would blow us apart," Caleb said. "Well, congrats," June muttered. "It worked." I stood. "We need to stop talking around this. That house wasn't just property. It was family history. It was her legacy. She wanted us to know what happened for a reason." Lydia was already pulling out her laptop, fingers flying. "I'll file a request for old property transfers. See if I can dig anything up." June rolled her eyes. "I hope you enjoy your rabbit hole." Caleb looked at me. "What are you hoping to find, really? A smoking gun? Closure?" "Closure will be nice," I said. So would a goddamn answer. But it wasn't just about answers anymore. Something had changed in the air, like the ground under us wasn't as stable as we thought. Like if we kept pulling at threads, the whole thing might unravel. That night, I dreamed of the house on Miller Street. Empty, silent, windows boarded up, a single chair rocking on the porch, back and forth, with no wind to push it. We didn't sleep that night. Lydia sat cross-legged on the living room floor with files spread out like tarot cards. June took over the laptop, digging through online property databases and tax records with the intensity of a private investigator. Caleb, usually the one to disengage, kept pacing like a man caught between punching a wall and walking out the door. Me? I sat by the window with a notepad, scribbling down timelines and connections like I was trying to solve a cold case. Because that's what it felt like now, not just family drama. A full-blown mystery wrapped in deception, paper, and faded ink. "So let me get this straight," I said. In 1987, Mark files a fake deed. No witness. Notarized somewhere upstate. Probably by someone willing to look the other way. Lydia nodded without looking up. Then the house is sold to a shell buyer, some LLC that doesn't exist anymore. Transfers hands a few more times over the years. Classic laundering. But the taxes? Never fully switched. Which means Ruth maybe still had some legal claim, June added. Even if she never acted on it. Why wouldn't she? Caleb asked, rubbing his eyes. She knew. She wrote the damn letter. Why not go to lawyer? Press charges. Because then we'd know, Lydia said softly. And knowing would have shattered this family long before now. That shut everyone up for a moment. And then June, clicking through archived real estate reports, stopped cold. Oh my God. We all turned. She rotated the laptop. This woman, Patricia Wyatt. She bought the house on Miller Street 5 years ago. Cash sale. But guess who the sale was processed by? We leaned in. Mark Atwood. Silence. That son of a Caleb started. She never sold it, Lydia whispered. Not really. He kept it. Used it. Maybe rented it out. And then flipped it later, all onto the table. It wasn't just a one-time lie. It was an operation. A long con stretched across decades. And Grandma Ruth had watched it all in silence. Until the end. I stood, heart thudding. We need to talk to this woman. Patricia Wyatt. Already emailed her, June said. If she's got paperwork, we'll know for sure who signed it. Caleb clenched his fists. If Mark profited off her name. Lydia handed me the folder. We bring it all. The fake deed, the letter, everything. It felt like loading a weapon. The next day, we drove into town to a quiet suburb outside the old district. Trees lined the streets. Children played hopscotch on the sidewalk. And there, at the end of the cul-de-sac, was the house. Our house. Patricia was in the garden when we arrived, trimming roses. She stood when we approached, wiping dirt from her gloves, watching us with guarded curiosity. You must be the Atwoods, she said. I was expecting you. We didn't speak at first. She nodded toward the porch. Come on up. Let's talk. Lydia was always the smart one. Not book smart, though she had the degrees to prove it, but cut through the bullshit smart. She didn't wait for permission, didn't care about politeness. So when she marched into the county records office the next morning, I wasn't surprised to find out she already had a list of names, dates, and deed numbers scribbled on a legal pad. I tagged along because I knew she'd need backup, not just in case someone tried to stonewall her, but in case she found something we weren't ready for. The clerk at the front desk, a man in his 60s with white suspenders and a coffee stain on his shirt pocket, took one look at her and sighed. Another inheritance dispute? Something like that, she said, handing him the list. He grumbled and disappeared into a back room, the kind with fluorescent lights that buzz like bad memories. You think they'll have it? I asked. She nodded. If it exists, it's here. Every legal land transfer has to be recorded somewhere, even the dirty ones. We waited. 10 minutes later, the clerk returned with a manila folder and a look on his face like he wished he hadn't found it. Transfer from Ruth Atwood to M. Atwood, filed September 12, 1987. Witness signature missing. Notarized out of county. That's unusual. Lydia snatched the file. Her eyes scanned the page like she was trying to read through the ink. He forged it, she whispered. This signature, this isn't hers. I leaned over. She was right. I'd seen enough birthday cards from Grandma Ruth to know. Her R's were always curled. This one was jagged, rushed. Forgery, she said louder now. This is it. This is what she was talking about. The clerk coughed. Ma'am, I'm not a lawyer, but if that's what you think, you might want to talk to one. That's a criminal matter. No statute of limitations on fraud involving property, Lydia said automatically. At least not in this state. We left with copies, Lydia clutching the folder like it was the Holy Grail. Outside, the sky was overcast, the kind of gray that pressed down on your lungs. She knew, Lydia said. She knew the deed was fake, and she kept it buried. All these years. To protect us? I asked. Maybe to protect him. We drove back in silence, the road winding like a bad memory. When we pulled into the driveway, June and Caleb were waiting on the porch. Both looked uneasy. Caleb stood. You guys need to hear something? Lydia froze. What now? June held up her phone. A neighbor from Miller Street called. The woman who lives in the house now? She's been getting mail addressed to Ruth. As recently as last month. What? I stepped closer. That house was sold 37 years ago. Exactly, Caleb said. So why is Ruth's name still tied to the property? Lydia's grip tightened on the folder. Because maybe it was never properly transferred. Maybe the sale wasn't as clean as Mark thought. June nodded. And get this, property taxes on that address? Still being paid from an account in Grandma's name. We all stared at each other. She hadn't just left us a letter. She'd left us a trail. And maybe, just maybe, the real story was still buried. The porch hadn't changed. Same chipped white railing. Same lopsided swing hanging from rusted chains. Same creaky floorboards under our feet, the ones we used to race across barefoot in the summer, pretending the wood was lava. Except now, someone else lived here. Someone who had no memory of Ruth, or the sound of our father hammering nails into that railing after storms, or the burnt smell of her cornbread wafting out from the kitchen every Sunday. Patricia Wyatt poured lemonade for all of us like we were neighbors, not investigators. She was in her late 50s, polite but wary, with steady eyes and a careful smile. The kind of woman who never invited trouble, but knew how to stand her ground when it showed up on her lawn. I wondered how long it would take, she said, sitting down in the rocker. When a mail kept showing up with her name, Ruth Atwood, I figured something wasn't right. Lydia pulled out the file, sliding it across the small table between us. We think the original sale of this house was fraudulent. We're trying to understand how it stayed in our uncle's control all these years. Patricia nodded slowly. I bought this place 5 years ago, yes. From Mark Atwood. No real estate agent. Just a lawyer he brought in. Cash offer. He said it was a family property passed down through the years, and he wanted to see it go to someone who'd care for it. Did you get a copy of the title history? June asked. Patricia reached inside and came back with a folder of her own. I did, but parts of it didn't make sense. Looked like someone refiled the deed multiple times. Some signatures were inconsistent. Caleb looked like he was about to explode. So he kept using the house as a piggy bank. Over and over. I leaned forward. Can we see it? She handed me the folder. Inside, everything lined up. Mark's signature. A series of LLCs created and dissolved within a year. Rental income reports. Quiet refinancing. At least 2 loans against the property. All while Ruth was still alive and unaware, or at least unwilling to act. Patricia tapped one of the pages. What made me suspicious was this line. The escrow account used for the closing? It was in Ruth Atwood's name, but the signature on it totally different from the rest. Like someone forged it and didn't even bother making it match. Lydia exhaled sharply. This is a legal disaster. He faked the sale, kept ownership, moved money under fake entities, and kept it quiet. And no one knew because Ruth never wanted to go public. June crossed her arms. She stayed quiet for us. We sat there for a long time. And then Patricia said something none of us expected. If you want to take this to court, I'll help. I still have everything. Emails. Documents. Even the lawyer's name he used, Douglas Neely. He made me nervous from the start. Caleb finally spoke. We're not just going to court. We're digging everything up. Full stop. If there's more, we'll find it. Patricia nodded. Well, then you're going to need something else. She stood, disappeared inside, and returned with a box. Previous owner left this in the attic. Said it wasn't hers to throw out. I never opened it. Figured it was personal. She handed it to me. My name was on the top, written in Ruth's loopy cursive. I opened it. Inside were photographs, receipts, handwritten notes. A timeline, clear as day, of everything Mark had done. Ruth had documented it all, page after page. She hadn't just left us a letter. She had prepared for war. She just waited until after she was gone to pass us the ammunition. The box smelled like cedar and dust. It wasn't big, but it felt heavy in my hands, like it carried more than just paper. Like it carried Ruth's silence, finally lifted. We brought it back to her house that evening and set it down in the center of the dining room table. The same table we'd gathered around for birthdays and Thanksgivings. The table where Mark once carved the turkey like he hadn't carved us out of our inheritance years before. Lydia opened the box like she was defusing a bomb. The first thing she pulled out was a hand-drawn family tree, sketched in Ruth's handwriting. Our names at the bottom, Mark's circled in red. Underneath, she'd written, what he stole wasn't just land, it was roots. Then came the receipts, bank withdrawals in large amounts, dated around the same time as the supposed property sale, each with a note, cash, unexplained, then letters, drafts of unsent ones, one to a lawyer, one to her church pastor, one to me. I read mine aloud. Danny, I'm sorry I never told you what happened. You always had your father's eyes, sharp, suspicious. I knew you'd see through it one day. I just hoped you wouldn't have to. Mark betrayed this family. He used your grandfather's death like an open door. He walked in and took everything. I kept records. I kept my peace. But now you have both. Use them how you see fit. Don't let this rot keep growing underground. Ruth, my throat went dry. Caleb reached for a stack of bank documents. These accounts, she opened them in our names. Trusts, separate from her will. Lydia blinked. She protected us, even after the theft. June tapped her nail against a yellowed ledger. But she also let him get away with it. For decades. Maybe she was waiting, I said, for us to be old enough, strong enough, or angry enough, Caleb added. That night, the 4 of us sat down and made a plan. We would take everything Ruth left behind, the receipts, the forged deeds, the notarizations, the bank trails, the LLC paper trails, and we'd build a case. Mark hadn't just stolen from Ruth. He'd stolen from all of us. The house, the legacy, the trust. But Ruth had played the long game. She had trusted us to find the truth when we were ready. And now we were. But just as we started organizing the documents, June's phone lit up. She stared at it. It's him. Caleb stood. Mark? June nodded slowly. He wants to meet. My jaw tightened. Where? She looked up at us. Here. He showed up in a beige Buick, same one he'd driven since 2005. Even that felt calculated, like he wanted to look harmless, nostalgic. The good OL uncle coming home to make peace. But we weren't kids anymore, and this wasn't about peace. Mark stepped out of the car in khakis and a windbreaker, like he was going to Sunday picnic. He carried nothing. No folders, no apologies. Just that same damn smirk that had aged into something colder over the years. A man who thought he'd won, now summoned to the scene of the crime. The porch groaned under his weight. Evening, he said like we were neighbors. Lydia didn't move from the top step. Don't pretend you came here for small talk. Mark looked at each of us. You found the letter. I folded my arms. And the box. He nodded like that didn't surprise him. Then I guess you think you got questions. No, Lydia snapped. We have answers. You're the one with explaining to do. He sighed. Look, things were complicated after your grandfather died. Ruth was slipping. She didn't understand the paperwork. I stepped in to help. You forged her signature, June said. You laundered the house through shell companies. You used her name to cash loans. And you sold the house after she died, Caleb added, stepping forward, pretending it was legally yours. But the paper trail says otherwise. Mark's jaw clenched. Ruth gave me permission. No, she didn't, Lydia said, voice sharp. She documented everything. She was preparing to expose you. We've seen the letters. The records. She just didn't pull the trigger while she was alive. His face changed. A flicker, something behind the eyes. Anger? Regret? No, it was fear. The kind of man gets when he realizes his lies are outnumbered by facts. She knew what would happen to this family if she spoke up, he said, quieter now. She didn't want it torn apart. I took a step toward him. You did that. Not the truth. You. He glanced toward the street like he might walk. Run. But he didn't. Instead, he sat on the porch swing, hands clasped like he was tired. Do what you want, he muttered. You want lawyers? Fine. Sue me. Drag my name through the dirt. You'll find out there's not much left to take. Caleb grinned coldly. We're not after what's left. We're after what you stole. Mark looked up at me. And what do you want, Danny? I didn't hesitate. I want Grandma's name cleared. I want the deed corrected. I want the money you made on Miller Street given back to the estate. And I want your face out of this house. He stood, slower now. You're all more like her than you realize, he muttered. Good, Lydia said. That's the point. He walked down the steps. Didn't say another word. Just got into his Buick and drove away. No one spoke for a while. Then June exhaled. He's going to fight us. Let him, Lydia said. I looked at the box again. Ruth hadn't written the end of the story. She left that to us. The day we filed the lawsuit, the courthouse smelled like bleach and coffee. Typical Monday morning chaos. Lawyers in mismatched suits, bailiffs yawning into their sleeves. Clerks who looked like they'd seen every kind of family feud in the book. We walked in with boxes, physical evidence, scanned documents, notarized statements. Lydia had color-coded the files. June had built a digital timeline that looked like a CIA conspiracy board. Caleb came for intimidation, mostly, and I came to watch the name Mark Atwood enter the system under defendant. Felt better than confession. We weren't just suing for money. We were suing to reverse the damage. Petitioning the court to declare the 1987 deed null and void, to restore Ruth's legal claim, and to freeze any assets Mark had acquired through that theft. Our lawyer, a woman named Hartman, read through the papers with a neutral, almost bored expression. But by the third page of forged deeds, her brow lifted. He's either an idiot, she said, or the most patient con artist I've ever seen. Both, June muttered. We knew it would take time. Courts move like molasses, especially when fraud meets probate. But once the ball started rolling, Mark's world began to crack. First came the banks. Old loans in his name started getting flagged. Then the IRS called, asking about property income he'd never reported. Then a lawyer representing the buyer of the house on Miller Street, Patricia Wyatt, contacted us, now involved as a third-party witness. By month 3, Mark tried to settle. He offered us a payout. Laughable, really. A small sum, no admission of wrongdoing, and a promise to walk away quietly. Lydia laughed in his lawyer's face. We didn't want his hush money. We wanted the truth loud. The media picked it up in week 5. Not the national stuff, just local headlines. Siblings accuse uncle of multi-decade inheritance fraud. Family property dispute reveals trail of forgery, deceit. Old neighbors started calling. Some backed him. Some didn't. Turns out, Mark had enemies even we didn't know about. People he'd stiffed, lied to, ghosted. But it wasn't about them. It was about Ruth. About her silence, her records, and what she'd hoped we would become. By month 6, the court ruled in our favor. The deed was vacated. Ruth's ownership reinstated retroactively. The estate reopened. The profits Mark made from the sale were ordered into a restitution trust. He was broke by month 7. His name, once respected in town, now circled the drain with whispers. Liar, thief, traitor. Some said we were cruel, airing family secrets like laundry. But most saw the truth. We weren't tearing the family down. We were saving what was left of it. We gathered on the front porch again, just the 4 of us. The house on Miller Street was no longer Patricia's. She'd offered to sell it back at a discount. Said she'd seen enough ghosts. Now, it was in our name. Not mine. Not Lydia's, or June's, or Caleb's. Ours. Joint. Equal. We weren't sure what to do with it yet. Museum? Community space? Maybe just keep it locked away like a relic. But for the first time in years, it felt like the past had a home. And it wasn't a tomb. I pulled out the last note Ruth had written. A tiny slip of paper tucked behind a family photo. Just one sentence. The truth doesn't keep us warm, but it keeps us upright. We stood in silence. Together. Not whole, but honest. And sometimes that's the better kind of healing.